Thank you guys all for joining us today. I know we started a little bit late. We had a few technical things we wanted to get straightened out a little bit. But my name is Rishabh. I am the co-head for this cycle's recruitment, along with Radha Patel. So just to get things off, get things started, if you guys have any questions, the way that this format is going to work is you guys can submit your questions to that link that is currently on the screen. So tinyurl.com/EMRA-QSub. And we have a whole bunch of regular members and coordinators that will be reading through these as you guys are submitting them and be answering them throughout the process. So there are a few questions that were submitted before this meeting, and then there's going to be some that you guys send. So we'll try to get to all the questions that we can today. And towards the back half of the session, we'll split out into breakout rooms so you guys can ask questions in a little bit of a smaller setting, specifically with some coordinators as well as some general members. With that being said, we can go ahead and get started. So if you guys have any questions, go ahead and use that link. That will be the primary way you guys ask questions. And then we'll get started with some of the questions that we have ready to go for you guys. Okay, so the first question that we have is, what is the time commitment like? So Grace, would you like to talk about that? I don't think Grace is on the call yet. Would anyone else, any of the other members like to take this?
Rishabh, I can take this one if you'd like me to.
Yeah, go for it.
Great. So thank you so much for your question. So the time commitment for the EMRA program varies based on member involvement, but typically what every member can expect to do is a regular shift where you're actively in the office screening for patients, going down to the EED, obtaining consents, doing any sort of clinical work. In addition to those regular shifts, which are 4 hours, and we have shifts, I have to say, from 8 a.m. to 12 to midnight every day. So, your shifts are pretty flexible otherwise, but you'll have that regular shift. And in addition, a 2-hour clerical shift where you'll still be in the office at Ronald Reagan. You might be doing phone consents with patients. You might be doing auditing of our data, doing paperwork. So those are kind of the baseline shift responsibilities. And then we have various committees that you guys might have heard about. The research mentorship, new member training committee. So depending on how involved you are in the program and take advantage of workshops or committee activities, your involvement could be 20+ hours a week. But that's kind of a range, like I said, based on members' personal preference and commitment to the program.
Thanks, Itai. We can head to the next question. This one is for you, Rish. If we're a reapplicant that made it through the interview stages, are we permitted to reuse past answers? Rish, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry. Okay, there we go. Let me just take a look at the question one more time. Sorry. Yeah. So if you are a reapplicant and you've kind of made it to interview stages, primaries or secondaries, we still do recommend that you guys, change up the answers to the application that we have. In the time that you've applied last, there's obviously a lot that may have changed with you, and we would like to see some of the changes in your application in that way. And we do, kind of keep note of that. So yeah, if you're reapplying, try to take a new stab at the questions, and we will be factoring that into your application.
Great, okay. So this next question is for Rebecca. It might be a similar situation to that a lot of you may be in. So it reads, I'm a current patient transfer volunteer at the UCLA Medical Center and currently have 99 hours. The minimum requirement for this program is 100 hours, and because of COVID-19, volunteer positions were paused and I could not place a final shift to schedule in my last hour. I'm currently away from UCLA and will not be able to return to the hospital to complete another shift before the end of the application cycle for EMRA, if volunteer positions were to proceed again. I'm wondering if I'm still able to apply since I'm only 1 hour away from the minimum in this other program.
Yeah, so this is kind of a tricky situation. It's something you would need to confirm with the volunteer office that it's okay based on your current program's requirements, and if also your current program is authorizing that 99 hours due to these bizarre circumstances that you're cleared to complete your current volunteer assignment to go on to a next one, then we could take you on. But otherwise, the volunteer office would still require you to finish it. If it's just 1 hour, you do have the opportunity to apply and complete that hour. If they're not operating, then we're usually not having you guys go into the hospital either. We're still remote as of now. So if it's just 1 hour, you could still finish it, but it would have to get approval by both the volunteer office and your current program.
Thanks, Rebecca. So our next question is for Eric. When enrolling patients into research studies, do EMRAs simply suggest qualifying patients to PIs, or do they have most of the control in the process?
Yeah, so we take care of most of the things when it comes to consenting. That's why you have to know the protocols of all our studies like the back of your hand. So you basically take care of everything. But with that being said, there are some studies like our Clover study that we do everything up until the consenting process, and our SRAs do that. But other than that, we do everything. And so we have to know which patients qualify, which ones are excluded, and then we actually talk to them or talk to the doctors to consent them into our studies.
Thank you. Next one is for Valerie. Do EMRAs choose a study where they would spend most of their shifts, or do they have equal exposure to all of them?
As a general member, you have equal exposure to all the studies, so you don't actually get to pick what study you're going to be working on. You work on all of them together. However, some studies do take more time than others. For example, as Eric mentioned, Clovers, it's quite a time-consuming study, but the patients for Clovers come around more rarely than patients for, say, other studies like the troponin study and others. So really, you get pretty much equal exposure to all of them, and you do need to know the protocols and the procedures for all of the studies, and for how you should conduct yourself with all of the studies. But some studies you will have more shift to shift interaction with than others.
Definitely, thank you. So our next one is for Garrett. What kinds of specialties do EMRAs have the opportunity to shadow?
So shadowing is a great part of EMRA. We have access currently to only shadow in the emergency department. So that means you're going to spend the majority of your time shadowing emergency department physicians, getting to see what an emergency department shift is like. It's a really fantastic opportunity. However, one of the nice things about shadowing in the emergency department is that a lot of other specialties collaborate with the emergency department, because patients that get admitted typically flow from the emergency department to a different ward of the hospital. So a cool little perk of getting to shadow in the emergency department is you will get to see a lot of other specialties as well. So personally, in my shadowing experience, I've seen some vascular surgery, I've seen trauma surgery, but those aren't things we currently have access to. It's just kind of something you might see on shift while you're in the emergency department. We're working on getting expanded access right now, but that's currently on hold due to the COVID situation. But in the future, we may get access to other specialties, but right now it's just the emergency department.
Thanks, Garrett. So this next one is for Davis. In the slide titled Resources Summary from the info session video that we posted earlier, who would counsel EMRAs during drop-in hours, and what would the EMRA courses Bruin be?
Yeah, so for the counseling drop-in hour, usually I was the one that took care of that. It's because I worked for the counseling department for a few years, so it would usually be either a drop-in hour or like a one-on-one session where people can ask questions about degree requirements or when should I take this course based on my experience. But that's one of the resources that might be discontinued in the school or after I graduate. But one of the ways to kind of counteract that is to have resources like the EMRA Courses Bruin Rock, which is the other aspect of the question. For a lot of you guys that are on this call right now, as you guys have probably seen on the Bruin Walk, it doesn't always get updated very frequently. So one way we kind of work on that is that we basically have all of our members input the courses that they've taken in the past or currently, and it basically allows people to ask questions about any courses they might have any inquiries about, whether it's the instructor or the class. And so there's a lot of resources out there, and those are two of the more academically inclined ones in the program.
Thank you, Davis. So this next one is for Kevin. During the info session video, Kyle mentioned that EMRAs had the opportunity to conduct data analyses in the former study whole blood or transfusion of stored whole blood in a civilian trauma center. Would you elaborate more on what this data analysis entailed?
Yeah, definitely. So a whole blood study, basically that was our study looking at 4 patients that come in with a trauma. Is it better to give them whole reconstituted blood or to give them the components of blood separately? That's called component therapy. And this poster specifically, what we were looking at is that subset of, at the time, 80 to 90 patients who actually got enrolled into this study, either getting whole blood or component therapy. So as for the actual analyses, a lot of undergrads don't have statistical training. So we took a more descriptive approach. That means looking at how much blood did people in each group get, and how can we visualize that, for example, with a box plot or by putting that information in a table. We also looked at different patient demographic information, clinical information, such as how long they stayed in the ICU, how long they stayed in the hospital in general. And more broadly, this was really a valuable experience for a lot of the members. And that's one of the experiences that you'll have access to in the research committee, because it really gives you an opportunity to think about results and how to frame that and how to discuss clinical research with the public and kind of contributing to the literature in that way.
Thank you. So our next one is for Rishabh. Approximately how many people apply for the program and how many get accepted? What percentage do you accept for the first round of interviews and for the second round? Rish?
Yeah. So typically, so it really does change cycle to cycle. We get a varying amount of applicants, especially since one is during fall quarter and one's during spring quarter. So naturally, we get a lot more applications during fall quarter than spring quarter. But even with that said, we don't really have a percentage cutoff. It's more of just the quality of the applications that are coming in. So we do tend to change the number of people that we decide to interview throughout the entire process, depending on the quality of those applications. So it's kind of hard to speak on that, but roughly, I would say in terms of the number of interviews that we typically give out for primaries, at least, it can range from around 50 up to 100. It really just depends on the cycle. And then going into secondaries, that also changes depending on how primaries go. It's around 20 to 30 interviews that we give out. So it's really hard to gauge from cycle to cycle, especially this one, considering everything that's going on. So I'm sorry, I can't really give you a really good answer to that question, but yeah, that's kind of where we're standing right now.
This next one is for Rebecca. If we are involved in a volunteer program within the hospital, for example, nursing volunteer program, will this affect us in the process of applying to EMRA?
So there's just 2 requirements when you're already in a volunteer program before applying to EMRA. And the one is that you meet the requirements for the volunteer program that you're already in. Since you're already committed to them, that's the first priority. The second is you can't go over 20 hours a week of volunteer hours, and that's like a hard standard by the volunteer office, and they're kind of expanding the rules to even include if you're in a lab. So if you are volunteering for the nursing program, for example, and you're volunteering in a lab and you're already at 18 hours a week, you won't be able to join EMRA because we have the requirement of at least 6 hours a week. So that's the only problem, but we do have a lot of members that are in multiple volunteer programs and can speak to their ability to balance that as long as they're under 20 hours a week.
Great. So this next one is for Sarah. Is the program open to first-year students?
Yes, the program is open to first-year students. We have a handful of first-year students apply each cycle, and from past experiences, a lot of first years do apply the spring quarter of their first year at UCLA. And that being said, we also have first years join our program from fall quarter as well. But yes, the short answer is the program is open to first-year students and also for post-grad students as well.
Great. This next one is for Rebecca. A lot of people ask this one, so I'll try to fit in all of them at the same time so we can get them answered. It has to do with summer volunteering. So to start, would new recruits have to start this summer? Do we need to be here at UCLA during the summer to be a part of the organization? And how does summer training look like? And just with everything going on, it's a good general question for us to know.
So I wish I could give you guys like 100% clear answer, but as you know, with this whole COVID situation, things change every day. If the volunteer office is closing volunteers from continuing going into the hospital, then we won't have accepted members go into the hospital this summer. If it opens, then we will continue as normal. I'm a staff member for those that don't know, but I'm still, having open discussions with administration based on if we're going to require people to come. We don't want to because a lot of you lost your housing or had to go home. So we're trying to keep it as open as possible for remote learning. The only difficulties with that is you don't have a lot of the resources needed to learn. But if you are able to come to campus, campus is open, the hospital is open, then we will have people come in.
Thank you, Rebecca. This next one is also for you. Due to the current situation with COVID-19, are current first-year UCLA students currently in care extenders allowed to apply?
So kind of in reference back to the question made earlier, it would have to be approved by both the volunteer office and care extenders. If you're in them and you already met the requirement for care extenders, then it's okay. This rule of you have to meet your previous program's requirements, it's not necessarily set by us completely, it's also set by the volunteer office. So they kind of come above everyone else.
Thank you. Okay. So this next one, sorry, it's going to be two more for you, Rebecca. This one is about the non-traditional route. So do you consider students who currently attend UCLA Extension for their pre-med certificate? I'm a non-traditional pre-med student. I applied for the program last year but didn't get accepted.
Yeah, we do consider students that are in non-traditional paths, students that are in extension classes, a post-bac. You do not need to be in an undergraduate class, like enrolled full-time to be an EMRA.
Perfect. And this next one is, I graduated from Biola University last year. I do not have any ties to UCLA. Can I still apply?
Yeah, you could still apply. We're open to people outside of UCLA, and I think it's important to gain an outside perspective of students that haven't gone to classes here to be a part of EMRA.
Perfect. So this next question is for one of our general members, so feel free to just answer them as you see fit. But what does a normal shift look like? And feel free to jump in.
I can take that. So generally, you have two different types of shifts. As we mentioned before, you have your regular shift, which is where you do your bulk of your screening for all of the different studies. So you go through the ED track board, which is like the list of all of the patients who come into the emergency room based on your knowledge of the protocols for the studies. You sort them into categories for which patients will qualify for which study. You generally, there's a lot of screening and a lot of that sort of work during your shift, but then also you get to, if you find that a patient is going to qualify for a particular study, you go down to the emergency department and either, talk to the resident and get the resident to proceed with the rest of the enrollment, or you do the enrollment yourself, which lets you interact with the patient themselves as well as the residents. That's it.
Thank you. Okay, so our next one is for Evan. How much interaction do you get with physicians in the hospital?
Sure. So I guess interacting with physicians is a really big thing that we do, and everything communication is key. So I guess on any general shift, you're going to be interacting with patients. You're going to be interacting with physicians. So you would expect on a general average shift that you're going to be interacting with those physicians on every shift. And then even besides that, even besides shifts, what you get is going to be what you put out of the program. We have all of our committees, all of our different groups that you can be a part of, and those committees also interact with physicians, interact with people. So I guess on a shift, you can expect to interact with physicians on a pretty regular basis. And then outside of shifts, it depends on how much you want to put into the program.
Perfect, thank you. So this next one, Garrett is going to be taking this one. Do you accept many non-UCLA students?
So the short answer is absolutely. We've had plenty of non-UCLA students in the past. We're open to postbacks or undergraduates. Whoever wants to apply that isn't from UCLA, definitely feel free. Granted, our program is mostly UCLA students because that's who tends to apply the most, but we are definitely open to non-UCLA students.
Perfect. Okay, so this is a longer question for Justin. The ER can be an incredibly intimidating place, both during and post-treatment. How do EMRAs approach patients who might be overwhelmed, possibly even bordering on shock? In cases where patients are too overwhelmed to respond or even unresponsive, as I could see being a possibility, especially in the sepsis study, how is that handled? Are you instructed to opt to the surrogate?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. And in general, it really depends on the study. So for each of our studies, we follow a standardized protocol, and it's important to know that first and foremost, patient care comes first before our research. And because of this, we communicate regularly with the residents and the SRAs, which are people like Rebecca, and also our study coordinators to determine when it's like most appropriate to approach a patient. And also if it's okay to approach basically the legally authorized representative, which can represent the patient to enroll them into a clinical trial. And it's a really good question for me because for my first Clover sepsis enrollment, the patient was actually too ill to provide informed consent. And so we worked with the resident and the SRAs to inform the legally authorized representative in order to consent the patient.
Thank you so much. Okay, so this next one is for Valerie. Is it challenging working with doctors on research topics many of us undergrads are not used to reading about?
So this is an interesting question because I think it's pretty daunting going into an emergency department, especially if you're someone who hasn't had exposure to the clinical environment before. And you do have to retain a lot of knowledge, but we do have a great team of trainers who really lead you through the process of the protocols and how to best understand them. So while yes, it is challenging and it's daunting, you get kind of integrated into it with older members who have been through the same process, and they really for me they really helped me through. My trainer really helped me understand the studies and understand the protocols and broke down why the study's being done, the research that goes into the study, and why we are doing our specific part. It is the interactions with physicians regarding the studies. Actually, a lot of the times you end up telling them, a lot of physicians are really busy and they don't always have time to read through all the protocols. So actually a lot of the time you end up explaining the studies to them, which makes it at the same time more scary but also less scary because you can present yourself in a certain way. So this is kind of a double-sided issue.
Thank you, Valerie. So this next one is for Trisha. When you're reading questions, application questions, what kinds of prior experience makes an applicant stand out? What health organizations were you all a part of before you joined EMRA?
Okay, so I'll try to address the first part of that question first. So we don't really look at anything in particular kind of in your written applications. We really just want you guys to answer the questions honestly. We want to see how reflective you are in terms of your past experiences. We want to see like if you've shown growth, and ultimately what I think would be helpful is just trying to tie things back to why specifically you want to be an EMRA and how you think any previous experiences or skills that you've obtained are applicable to what EMRA does. Because at the end of the day, what we're looking for is people who are going to be able to jump into an emergency department, which is a fast-paced environment, and be able to, communicate well with residents and with patients as well. So we're really just looking for basic skills like that, just to make sure that you'd be a great team member. And then to answer the second part of the question, like what other health orgs part of, so you don't have to be part of a health organization before you join EMRA. You can have like no clinical experience whatsoever, and that's totally fine. I personally was in care extenders before, but yeah.
Thanks, Trisha. So our next one is for Julia. What has surprised you about being an EMRA? In other words, what is something that you've experienced or done that you did not expect that has influenced your time in the program?
Okay, so I wanted to answer this one just because I'm a new member. I joined in fall 2019. So pretty much like everything was surprising to me and cool to me when I was first starting out. I think the biggest thing that was a surprise and was really interesting to learn was just how dynamic of an experience it is, especially as an undergrad. I think that EMRA is by far like the most engaging and the most in-depth volunteering program that's open to us as undergrads. So just like the amount of things I've been able to see in the emergency department, like I've observed an open door economy during a trauma, and get to see the decision-making process behind that and to see the teamwork that the doctors and the nurses and everybody involved in emergency care has to go through. So I think like the biggest thing that I've learned so far is just medicine is all about teamwork, and I think EMRA is the perfect introduction to that, because not only do we get to observe doctors and nurses and everyone in the care team exhibiting that kind of teamwork, but we as EMRAs, not only do we have to know our stuff as individuals, but we work best as a team, and we have to communicate with each other and make sure everybody is on the same page. So just like in-depth nature of the entire thing is probably the biggest surprising thing, but also just how much we get to see and how involved we get to be.
Thank you, Julia. So this next one is for Trisha. The program overview video says EMRAs can become project leads to oversee the development of projects. Could you talk about how that process works, from pitching studies to getting faculty mentorship?
Yeah, so becoming a project lead is kind of a little bit farther down the line from when you start as an EMRA. So basically, once you're a general member, you can apply to be a coordinator. And out of the coordinator team, most of us will be the ones that lead studies. So we'll be the ones that come up with the protocol, we'll like maintain the study, we'll troubleshoot, and we work directly with the SRAs on that. So if that's something you're interested in, that's definitely something that you can do. And then in terms of pitching studies, we don't actually pitch studies to faculty mentors. They actually kind of pitch studies to us. The way that we see it is EMRA basically is a way for the ED to collect data in environments where they can't really stop what they're doing and collect it themselves because they're treating patients constantly. So EMRA is kind of here to bridge that gap between physicians and patients, and for that reason, usually the studies come to us from any physician that's interested in starting a research project themselves.
Thanks, Trisha. This next one is for Itai. I understand members don't have the entire summer break off, but do members get any break? If I wanted to do physics abroad next summer, would that be possible since it's only a portion of summer?
So I think this is a great question. Unfortunately, we do expect our members to continue their involvement through the summer. I personally attended the Physics Abroad program at the University of Sussex, so I have some personal experience with this. And the only way that I was able to do this was to communicate this issue ahead of time to the managers. And I found actually someone who was willing to cover my summer shifts. And I was able to make up that time and, fulfill the responsibilities of the program. I would caution against, you know, it's a big requirement. Like doing double shifts while doing fall quarter is a lot of work. So make sure you're prepared for that if you're going to take that route. And I think that, you know, this is all contingent on finding someone who will actually cover for you. So that's kind of my insight on that question.
Thank you so much. So these next two questions are for Justin. The first one is it possible to sign up for more than one shift a week? And the second one is, what is a training process like?
Yeah, so in general, we cover shifts from 8 a.m. to midnight. And so we have enough members so that each member can cover one shift each. And if the member is in need of like a cover shift, then you go ahead and sign up and cover for that other member. So yes, in a way, you can sign up for more than one shift, but in general, you're required to do one a week.
And the second one is, what is a training process like?
Right. So I just came off the training process over winter break, and essentially you have 3 to 5 shifts where you're going to be working with a past EMRA member, and they'll guide you through every single study protocol. And it's basically a hands-on experience where you'll just go through the protocols with them and go through the whole shift with them. So by the time you're done with training, you'll be able to pass an evaluation shift to make sure you can do all the jobs satisfactorily, and then you'll be a full-fledged member from then.
Perfect. So this next one is for Itai. What is the application like, and do we need letters of rec?
So the application consists of a written primary application that will be read by our EMRA coordinator team and our managers. You do not need letters of rec, but we do ask you to submit references. If you are invited to a secondary interview, we will also ask for an official transcript that you will have to request from the registrar, as well as a resume and a headshot. So those are the only components for the application.
Perfect. Okay, so I just wanted to let all of you who are watching know we have around 10 more questions, and at approximately 6:45, we'll start breaking out into the session rooms or the breakout rooms. It hopefully will give you a chance to talk to some of the coordinators and general members and ask more questions if you want to directly, but also feel free to leave at any time, and you can leave before that point if you don't want to join the breakout rooms. Okay, so this next question is for Kevin. Our campus is full of a vast variety of pre-med organizations. What does EMRA offer that is unique to itself and makes it stand out amongst other organizations?
Yeah, this is a great question. So I would say when you're looking at what really differentiates EMRA, it's kind of important to understand the dynamic that we have with faculty and with doctors in the ED. You know, we help them with their research that without a staff, without a group of students to help with, that wouldn't be viable. And as a result, we really do get a lot of benefits from them in this reciprocal relationship. So mentorship, we get support from attendings, from residents who actually come to our different events. They talk about, you know, their career, their own educational paths. They come speak at our meetings. Research, we have access to more mentored research opportunities with faculty that want to have their own projects and want a smaller team of EMRAs to help with. All of this is possible because we help the department with its research, and in turn, they give us these opportunities and they give us access. Not many pre-med organizations will give you access to the emergency department, and when we had our whole blood study, the operating room. And that really comes from this relationship that we do have with the faculty that work in this hospital.
Perfect. So this next one is for Rebecca. I was interested in an organization called Think, which works on health literacy and quality of care improvement through a summer fellowship. Do you know if Think is one of the programs that you can't be a part of while being a part of EMRA?
This is something I'll need to confirm with the administration here, but I believe if it's just a fellowship that doesn't go through like the weekly volunteer logging, you should be clear to do both EMRA and Think. Again, I don't want to say it's completely set in stone and it's like a path that we could go through once you apply and going through interviews, because we do contact the volunteer office regarding every applicant. So that's something that we could approach then. And then there's also another, if it is an issue, there's another application cycle later this year. There's always 2 every year. So if you don't get that opportunity now, you could always apply again after your fellowship is finished.
Perfect. So this next one is for Eric. What kind of backgrounds, such as classes or experiences, should we have?
Yeah, so it definitely does help having some sort of medical knowledge to do well in this program, but it's definitely not required. I myself am a physiological science major, and that does help in some aspects, but at the same time, there's some of our studies that I really didn't know what was going on, so you just have to have the willingness or the willingness to learn about them and put in the work to learn the protocols and learn how everything's happening and what our aim is. In terms of experience, you just have to be able to work hard and be able to work quickly because we are in the emergency room, so you have to be quick on your toes. But anybody, our program's open to anybody, so you don't have to have any particular experience or classes or anything.
Great. So this next one is for Rish. Is there a GPA cutoff or requirement? Rish?
Thank you. Yeah, so for GPA cutoff and requirement, we don't really have an official GPA cutoff or requirement that we use for the program, just because every cycle is different when people apply. The main thing that I would like to point out is that this year on our application, we did kind of adjust one of the questions to encompass the GPA, like in case you think your GPA is a little low, and you have an explanation as to why your GPA is low or any other factor of your application that you think is kind of holding you back, we want you guys to be able to express that. So we kind of opened up another space for you to be able to discuss that. And those are all things that we do take into consideration. And in previous cycles, like GPA is a factor in our application cycle, but we also do look through the entire application, to make sure that if there is any other explanation as to why your GPA may be low, we do want to bring you into an interview to see how you are as an applicant. So just make sure if you're applying and you think that your GPA is like low or there's any other reason that might be influencing that, please use that space to talk about, kind of explain yourself there.
Perfect. So we have 3 more questions. This next one is for Vaibhavi. How much time do members typically spend outside of shifts to prepare?
So I would say if you are a new member, which those of you that do join, you guys will be new members, it's important to sort of review the protocol that will be sent out to you, because we do have different studies that do get introduced throughout the year, as well as ones that continue for quite a while. So it's important to brush up on the protocol just so that when you get to shift, it's more engaging for you and you feel like you have control of the information, because a lot of the procedure and a lot of the process of EMRA is to make it very catered to you, so you are very proactive in terms of the knowledge that you're receiving and how you're doing on shift. So it's important to review the protocol often.
Thank you. Okay, so this next one is for Garrett. Does EMRA research satisfy SRP 99 or SRP 199 credit?
So as a baseline, when you get accepted to EMRA after you're onboarded, you will get SRP 99 credit each quarter. I'm the coordinator that handles enrolling you in that, so you'll have to fill out a contract and you'll get credit for that. Additionally, there are some members that do get access to SRP 199 credit. If you get involved in a special research project on the side, it is possible to get SRP 199 credit, but this is typically only offered to members in good standing who have advanced through the program and have a little more experience in research before that's available. So it is possible to get both, but as a minimum, you will get SRP 99 credit as being a part of the program.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll answer 2 more questions and then we'll go ahead and split into the breakout rooms. There are a couple left in the forms, but you can go ahead and directly ask them to the cords or general members in your breakout room, or we can answer it tomorrow. Sorry about that. We just didn't want to keep anyone longer than the time that we mentioned. So for this next one, it's Davis, who conducts the interviews.
Yeah, so just really quickly, there's 2 interview rounds. There's a primary and a secondary. And the primary round, it'll be a mix of coordinators and general members. So those of you guys that end up joining the program, it's an opportunity to have an impact on, who might be the future generations of EMRA. During the secondaries, though, we do generally limit it to coordinators just because it usually is a little bit more detail-oriented and it's a little bit more thorough. But beyond that, like, you do get an opportunity to help out with interviews too if you join the program.
Perfect. And last one is also for you, Davis. Are international students eligible to apply?
Yeah, so we've actually had some international students in our program in the past that have done really well and gone on to do really great things both during and after the program. It's not a disqualifying factor by any means. But however, if you are an international student and you feel that there are any factors that may affect your ability to meet some of the criteria, such as being here for the entire year to serve your shifts, do communicate that with us by emailing the staff minute on the website FAQ section. Definitely do communicate that to us as early as possible throughout this application process so that we know that we can definitely accommodate you and kind of communicate those things early on.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Okay, so at this point, we're going to go out into breakout rooms. Feel free to ask any more questions. If you didn't have your question answered so far in this video or in this meeting, we'll start with them at the beginning of tomorrow's session. Thank you so much for joining, and please feel free to leave the breakout rooms whenever you want. We'll keep them running for around 10 minutes.
So now we have a question asking, do you have any recommendations for students who are applying for the second time? So Rithik, if you want to answer that question.
Yeah, so that's also a really great question. I was also a reapplicant, so I think this really hits home with me. I think some of the suggestions that I would have is just taking some time to engage yourself with EMRA as an organization. So I know there are a lot of pre-med and pre-health organizations out there at UCLA, but personally, EMRA is super unique. So just putting in the extra effort, like coming to our Q&As, listening to a lot of our info sessions and stuff like that, engaging with the organization and its members as a whole will not only help you kind of understand more what EMRA is about and what opportunities it offers for you, but also will help let us know that you're kind of engaged with the organization and this is something that you truly want to be a part of. And I think something else that I would highly recommend is just understanding what EMRA kind of stands for. So we are really keen on clinical research and ED clinical research and providing students the really necessary physician and patient interactions that we have and offer through our program. So we want to see somebody who recognizes that they're able to grow from the opportunities that EMRA provides, but also has a very interesting background and has something super cool to contribute to our organization as well. So hopefully if you'd already gone through this process once, you've gotten a chance to get some feedback from our members and our coordinator team. So implementing that in any way would definitely help as well.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Rithik. That's great advice. So yeah, for the next question we have, what are you looking for in your applicants? And that's for Kyle.
Yeah, so we went over this briefly in the information session, but this is a good question and worth going a little bit more into detail in. So overall, we look for people who really have the opportunity to contribute to the work that we do in the emergency department and can also gain a lot from the program. So to give a brief overview, we want people who are passionate about medicine and healthcare in general. We do have timed shifts wherein you have to come and leave at a certain time. So do look for dedication and reliability as well. And we are talking with patients a lot and really representing not only our organization, but also UCLA Health. So we really look for people who are competent interpersonally and their interactions. And lastly, as you know, we have a lot of people who applied to EMRA. You can see from the Q&A session alone that we have more people in attendance than we can take. So really we want to look for people who can really make the most out of this program and really take every opportunity that they can and really make this meaningful. So overall, these are some traits that we look for now.
All right, thank you very much, Kyle. So the next question is for Rebecca. So basically, will exceptions to the fulfillment of the commitment in another program be made because of the current situation that we're in? And this person's asking because they are trying to fulfill their commitment before the next application season, but they can't anymore because of the situation that's at hand.
So that exception will need to be made by your current volunteer program. So if they approve it, then we'll approve it. But again, it's reliant on your current program.
All right. Thanks, Rebecca. Next question we have is, do you prefer STEM majors who apply over humanities and social science majors? So Garrett, if you want to answer that question.
So we don't have any preference to your major. Granted, we don't get a lot of humanities and social science majors that apply. However, we don't weight that against them. It just tends to be a little more common for STEM majors to want to apply to EMRA, but we do have non-STEM majors in the program. We won't hold that against you. We just want to see that you perform well in your classes. So regardless of your major, try your best and make sure that you're getting good grades in your classes and you're showing us that you can succeed in taking on, an extra time commitment such as EMRA.
All right, thank you very much, Garrett. So the next question we have is, how are studies designed and chosen? Do EMRA members have a lot of input in designing the study protocols? And that's for Tricia.
Yeah, so this is a great question. So studies, the way that they're designed, it kind of varies, but really that's done by physicians. So what we do for EMRA is our faculty mentor, Dr. Cooper, actually decides like what studies we take on. But our EMRA coordinators actually get the opportunity to make study protocols. So this is basically the workflow for screening patients and enrolling them and consenting them. So you do get kind of like some hands-on experience if you decide to apply to be a coordinator, to be able to like do that and troubleshoot as well.
Thanks, Tricia. So the next question we have is also for you. So will it negatively affect an applicant if they are part of a different volunteer program, such as care extenders or nursing volunteers, and they did not complete the program? I believe that's what they were trying to say.
So for this to kind of like clarify, like there's a difference between completing a program, like completely. So like I know for care extenders, completing means that you've done 250 hours versus just doing the 50-hour requirement that's necessary for you to join another program. You for sure have to do the 50 hours because you can't apply to EMRA as Rebecca mentioned previously, but you don't have to complete the 250 hours that the other program made you do. And it's not going to reflect like poorly on you or anything. Being in a program before also doesn't reflect poorly on you. I myself did care extenders before I joined EMRA. And something that I would try to note when you're applying is if you have care extenders like on your resume, try to convey like how you think EMRA is going to be a different experience from something like care extenders and why you specifically want to do EMRA versus that other experience.
Thanks, Tricia. Yeah, and I completely agree with that. You want to like, if you're in other pre-med organizations and you're applying to this program, it's, a great idea to like talk about how that experience influences and how you want to grow from that experience and how EMRA is going to be able to offer that kind of that avenue for you. All right, so next question is for Henna. Which GPA should we put on our applications, especially if we are transfer students?
Hi everyone. So the GPA that you want to put on your applications is your UCLA GPA. So for example, if you were transfer students, you have grades for both fall and winter quarters, so we ask for that GPA. As previously mentioned, you can still apply even if you aren't a UCLA student. In that case, we ask that you put the GPA from whatever institution you attended or are currently attending.
Awesome. Thanks, Henna. So next question is also for you. Is it too late to apply if I'm going to be a fourth year next year?
Yeah, so it's definitely not too late to apply if you're going to be a fourth year. The one thing you have to be sure of is that you're able to commit 1 full year to the program. So following the training phase, you will begin independent shifts, and you have to be on independent shifts for 1 full year to fulfill the requirements of the program. So no matter if you're like a fourth year or a fifth year, or if you already graduated, whatever the case, you just have to make sure that you're able to fulfill that 1 year requirement to the program.
Awesome. Thanks. So next question is for Akil. Once you are in EMRA and you want to continue in the program, do you have to reapply?
All right, guys. So for this question, you do not have to reapply. Once you get into EMRA, you are allowed to stay in the program as long as you desire. Most EMRAs usually quit after they graduate college or maybe a year after if they want to keep performing in EMRA during their gap year. However, to avoid complacency, there are newsletter quizzes sent out on a weekly basis to evaluate whether or not you're keeping on with protocols. You could be subject to a drop-in from the coordinator if they see you slacking during shift, etc. And there are basic like EMRA duties that you need to complete on time to avoid getting strikes. And the only way you would get potentially removed from the program is accumulating 3 strikes, as well as like in between those strikes having meetings with coordinators and staff to determine whether or not the program is a good fit for you anymore.
Perfect. Thanks, Akil. So yeah, this next question is kind of a 2-in-1. So I'll ask the first question first. What kinds of duties are typically conducted during research with EMRA? Is it more wet labs tasks like gel electrophoresis and Western blots, or bioinformatics, for example? So Rithik, if you want to answer that question.
Yeah, so that's a great question. And one thing that I kind of like, that kind of helps me delineate between clinical research, which is what EMRA is doing, and wet lab research, is that just inherently clinical research involves a little bit less of that wet lab aspect of it. But EMRA does have opportunities, like I'm currently on our pedal activation team, which is a work study opportunity offered throughout EMRA, where I do get to do like a lot of aliquoting and a lot of centrifuging of some of our blood samples. But depending on the specific study that you will be screening for during your shift, there will be different tasks that you'll be asked to do. So that could either involve going up and approaching a patient and asking them to fill out a survey about their lifestyle and their lifestyle choices and stuff. And those are more for our retroactive studies. It could be consenting a patient to a specific study. So just kind of informing them of what the study is about, and if they kind of want to participate and give consent for us to use a lot of their demographic information and healthcare information for clinical research like usage as well. So, and then for some of our studies, we actually do collect blood samples that the nurses and a lot of the healthcare staff will take from the patient as well and be handling those.
Perfect. Yeah, you kind of answered that second question too. So the second part of the question was just what kind of data would you be expected to collect from the patient? So yeah, it's like some of them are samples, some of them are going to be kind of demographic surveys. So it's kind of dependent on the study. Yeah. All right, so for the next question, it's for Miles. Are there specific requirements to get into EMRA? And for example, like a GPA?
Yeah. Hi, guys. So kind of the short answer to that question is that GPA does matter. I think that EMRA can be pretty taxing in terms of the information and the time commitment, and we want to make sure that you guys are able to keep up academically. So to that extent, GPA matters. That being said, we do have a portion of the application that's dedicated to having you guys explain any kind of inconsistencies within your transcript, whether it be through extenuating circumstances or whatever else might cause a dip or a low GPA. We'd pretty understanding to that. In terms of, are we looking for any type of person or any requirement? There's really no specific person we're looking for. I'd say there's traits we're looking for, like reliability, passionate about medicine or healthcare, the things that Kyle mentioned earlier. But in terms of you being yourself, then, by all means, just go ahead and apply.
Thanks. So kind of tying into that question is, how likely is it for current freshmen to get in, since we don't have many classes to show, your academic standing? So Garrett, if you want to take that question.
Yeah, so if current freshmen do get into the program, it's very common. Granted, you only really will have 2 quarters worth of UCLA classes on your transcript, so your GPA may be a little less robust than you would like it to be. If you're worried about the current GPA on your UCLA transcript, then please make sure to write about it in that extra section that we're giving you to talk about it. But we're not going to hold it against you if, maybe you're struggling to acclimate to UCLA, but you feel you're ready to take on more responsibility. And if you can demonstrate to us that you've been able to handle more responsibility in the past, then we'll be more inclined to go with you. So we won't hold it against you for being a current freshman. We understand that you only have 2 quarters worth of classes on your transcript. So please go ahead and apply if you're worried about that. And if you feel like you do need to explain the numbers that are on your transcript, then by all means, go ahead.
Thanks, Garrett. So our next question is for Tim. What's been the most rewarding and memorable experience to come from being involved in EMRA?
Hi, guys. So one of the most rewarding experience for EMRA has just been the invaluable exposure to the emergency department. This has helped me really solidified my passion and my interest in being a pre-med and going to medicine in the future. And also one of the most valuable, also another valuable part has been the people that you're surrounded with in EMRA. You're not only surrounded by faculty, like the doctors who are supporting this program, and through that you're able to get a good idea of what the healthcare profession is like and what's expected out of those people, and also just the EMRA community. Everyone is so passionate, everyone's so driven about their goals, so it's encouraging to be running alongside these people in college. So that has been definitely one of the big pluses of EMRA.
All right, thanks, Tim. So our next question is for Garrett. What year are most of the applicants when they apply?
Yeah, so last recruitment cycle, our median applicant was a second year. This was data that we kind of just recently started acquiring about kind of the makeup of the classes that are applying to EMRA and then that are getting in. We didn't really have a bias in favor of any particular group though. It was more just because we had the most second years apply. But we don't tend to bias against any specific year. If you're post-bac, if you're a freshman, second year, third year, fourth year, it doesn't really matter. We're just looking to take the best people regardless of the year that they are in school.
Thanks, Garrett. And so for our next question, we have Trisha, and the question is, if we are not active in any other pre-med organizations currently, does that negatively affect us?
Yeah, no, it won't negatively affect you if you're not in a pre-med org before you apply to EMRA. Kind of how we mentioned before, like you could be a humanities major. You don't even have to have any like science experience really to be a part of EMRA. Ultimately, we just want to make sure that you're a good communicator, just so that when you're like thrown into a place like an ED, like you're able to communicate effectively with people. And of course, like also be a team player. But like ultimately, whatever skills that you think you can bring to the table, it doesn't matter where that comes from. It's just about telling us what those skills are and how you think that those skills can translate to EMRA.
Thanks, Trisha. And yeah, I completely agree with that too. So next question is for Henna. Will it be negatively looked upon if a student withdrew from a quarter due to personal reasons?
So it will definitely not be negatively looked upon if you withdrew from a quarter due to personal reasons. We're really understanding of the fact that people come from different backgrounds and have different situations, and the decision alone to withdraw from a quarter must have been very difficult, and we're definitely not going to hold that against you. We're also not going to ask you to really justify that to us, especially if it's for very personal reasons. If you feel like you want to, there is a section in the application where you can feel free to make any additional comments you feel are important to your application. So if you feel like that's something you want to convey, you can always put that there, but it definitely won't be negatively held against you. We'll just evaluate your performance in other quarters and your commitment in other quarters and kind of the traits that we see throughout the application and interview process, just to evaluate how good of a fit you are for our program and what our program can do for you.
Awesome. Excellently worded. Thanks, Henna. So next we have a question for Trisha. How many individuals are we looking to recruit this cycle?
Yeah, so that number kind of varies per cycle. It really just depends on what our needs are as a program. So a lot of the times, like we have members that are graduating, some decide to leave the program, but really that just depends on the program itself. So usually we take around like 7 to 10 applicants per cycle, but in the past we've taken more, we've also taken less. But like I said, it just depends on our needs.
Okay, thank you. And then next we have a question for Rithik. What kind of patient interactions do you have? And what's the best way to explain the nature of the research to a patient?
Yeah, so kind of like Trisha mentioned, one thing that we do look for are members who are good communicators. So similarly, that kind of comes into play with our patient interaction. So to kind of divide it up roughly, like all of our studies into 2 types of studies. There's some studies like our ABCT study where we get like exclusive access to a trauma bay when a trauma comes in, and we kind of get to observe all the procedures that are going through. So I think in that aspect, it's a little bit less one-on-one patient interaction, but it is super important because you get to see the whole healthcare team working collaboratively. And then I guess another type of studies that we could have would be a lot of our consenting studies, where we actually do get to interact with the patient on a one-on-one basis and kind of introduce them to clinical research if they're unfamiliar with it, and tell them about why it's so important to us and what we're going to be doing with this data and how they can be a really crucial part of that process as well. So I think that kind of addresses a little bit more of the second question in terms of like, what's the best way to introduce it? I think for me personally, that's where you get to show your individual flair and how great of a communicator you are, and kind of make the patient understand how important they are to what our mission is as EMRA through ED clinical research.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks, Rithik. And for our next question, it's for Trisha. How do I stand out as an applicant, and how is the interview process like?
Okay, so for the first part of that question, so standing out. So basically with EMRA, we do get a ton of applicants, and I'd say that no matter what experience you kind of decide to write about on your application, what makes people stand out is how they write about that experience. So don't try to focus too much on like, oh, I want to choose the coolest experience that I've had. Like, choose the experience that's going to show why you would be a good fit for EMRA. You want to choose something that shows us that you have a skill set that you can bring to the table and that will help you work in a team setting. And I think really you want to be able to tie every question that you answer into like why specifically that skill set is it's pertaining to EMRA. Like, why would, you know, you being a better communicator be important to a team like EMRA? Because that not only shows us that you have that skill, but that you understand what EMRA is. And we want people who are not only great and have these amazing skill sets, but like have an idea of what EMRA is and what we actually do, because that shows us that you're really motivated to take advantage of pretty much any opportunity that we give you.
Awesome. Thank you. And then next question is for Kyle. If we were to apply this year but couldn't fulfill a commitment until next fall and get accepted to the program, would we have to reapply next spring?
Yeah, so in brief, you would in essence have to somehow fulfill your minimum requirement with your current program, whether that be having met the 50 hours or finding a way where your program can in essence vouch for your participation in that program. So we do not accept deferrals of admittance, so you would have to apply again in the fall or spring.
Awesome, thank you. Next question is, hold on, let me take a look here. Okay, so next question is for Akil. Is there any positive advice that we can take in that would help our interview performance? I struggle with my interview skills, even though I tend to thrive with patient and interpersonal interactions.
All right. Hi guys. Basically, for my advice, I kind of want. I know when I applied, there was the 2 stages of multiple mini for the primary interviews, and then a regular, 1-on-8 secondary interview. Not sure exactly how that's going through Zoom yet, but basically my advice would be for primaries is to prepare and understand the actual mission of EMRA and what we just to show that, you're well versed and have done your due diligence in trying to figure out whether or not EMRA is actually a good fit for you as a program to begin with. And in the secondary interview, focus more so on the stories you want to tell about yourself instead of worrying about what the EMRA coords or the EMRA staff want to hear. I think that's an issue a lot of people tend to find, is they try to predict what the EMRA coords want to hear and try to give them that answer. But if you think about that, like, most applicants are also thinking the same thing and giving those same answers. It's hard to stand out in that way. If you just enter the interview and try to tell your story that's unique to you, you're more likely to stand out in the midst of a large applicant pool.
Thanks, that's great advice, Akil. Next question is for Trisha. You mentioned interviews during the application program. Given the current situation, will these interviews be conducted online through Zoom?
Yeah, so given the current situation, we are going to do everything on Zoom, kind of like we've had this info session on Zoom. Also to kind of give you guys an idea of like what the application cycle kind of looks like. We have our written applications, which go live tonight. And then we invite some of you guys for our primary interviews, which are also going to be on Zoom. It's pretty much going to be a couple of either general members or coordinators or SRAs that are going to interview you in one room. And then from those people from primary interviews, we will invite you guys to secondary interviews. And from secondary interviews, it's pretty much the same format of interview style. And then we'll send you guys emails about acceptances.
Thanks, Trisha. And then for our last question before we go into breakout rooms, it is, what is EMRA's mission? And for this, you can check out our information session video, which is on YouTube, or you can go on our website and check it out.